Welcome, everybody, to our monthly chocolatey product spotlight live stream for April 2024. Today, we are going back to basics again to look at what is chocolatey, the package manager for Windows, and chocolatey products as well. We run two live streams every month on the first and third Thursday. This live stream is where we spotlight chocolatey products, recent releases, upcoming releases, and important features. Our other live stream on the third Thursday of each month is a new live stream called Unpacking Software, which includes news, chat, and opinion on the world of software and software management. This is also available as a podcast. Details are in the description. You can be notified of all chocolatey content by joining our community hub on Discord, subscribing to us on YouTube, or following us on Twitter or X, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're on all the things, and you can find those links at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org. Scroll all the way down, or in the description of this video. We want to make sure that the content that we're streaming here today is what you want to see. And we've put together a very quick 15-second survey. I will pop that link on the screen shortly. And we'd really appreciate you completing that at the end of the stream today, just to let us know what you thought of the stream and any suggestions you have for future streams. It will literally take you 15 seconds. And you can find that link in the description as well. So my name is Paul Broadworth. I'm a technical engineering manager here at Chocolatey Software. I lead the engineering team that is responsible for the products we'll be talking about today. My co-host today is Gary Ewan Park. Gary, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Gary Ewan Park. I am a principal software engineer here at Chocolatey, and I work with the teams to develop all the chocolate products that everyone should hopefully know and love. But if you don't, this is our back to basics. So we'll teach you all about what Chocolatey CLI is.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. Let's get on to what is Chocolatey, the package manager for Windows, the products. Gary, tell us more.
So I guess we'll start at the beginning. So I mean, this back to basics series that we're doing in the previous back to basics episodes, if you like, we learned what is the chocolate community repository, and we also learned how you could create a chocolatey package. And the reason we kind of did it in that order is because we wanted to make sure that there was a clear distinction between what is chocolatey, the community, so where you might get and use packages from, and what is Chocolatey CLI, the actual executable that you'll use to install the packages that we now know about from the Chocolate community repository that you might want to use as where you want to get your applications from. So in this episode, the Back to Basics one, we're learning what the Chocolatey CLI is. So before we get to that, we'll just do a little bit of history because everyone likes a bit of history. So history is, where did all of this stuff come from? So way back, you have to cast your minds back now because Chocolatey as a project is quite an established project now. So it's been going for over 13 years now. We literally just had our 13th birthday, which was, Paul will remind me, it was 21st of March, I think. There's some ambiguity around that. Funny story. So 21st of March was its 13th birthday, and there was a blog post where we talked through that. But on that day, 13 years ago, Rob Reynolds, the founder of Chocolatey Software, created this thing that we now know as the Chocolatey or the Chocolatey CLI. So when it first started, Chocolatey CLI was a PowerShell module. It was a PowerShell application that allowed you to do stuff, and then it changed into this thing that is now, which is a C# based application. But that still doesn't answer the question of what Chocolatey CLI is. But before we can talk about that, we kind of have to establish again what a package manager is. So I know that this is something that Paul's got a lot of thoughts on, so he'll maybe jump in when I say something that's not quite up to his level. But a package manager is something that manages, wait for it, I've got it, it manages packages, right? So it doesn't manage software on your machine, it a package manager manages the package, the installation and placement of that package onto your file system. So the concept of a package manager is not a new one. It's relatively new to Windows, but anybody that's worked with any sort of Linux distro or any sort of Mac OS using Homebrew, the concept of a package manager is not new to them. They come baked into the operating system. So on a Windows operating system, it's never really been baked in. So this is where Rob found that there was a gap for a package manager on Windows. Like he set about doing that. So did I say all that right, Paul? That was right, correct? I got it right so far.
Yeah, yeah. You made me sound like a monster.
Nailed it.
Yeah,
Nailed it.
that's
So now that we know, so that's what a package manager is. So Chocolatey CLI is the Windows package manager. It is an executable, a program that runs on your Windows operating system that attempts to download and install packages. Now, it just so happens that within that package, there could be a script, and that script has the instructions on how to provision software onto your machine. So, what do I mean by that? So, let's take an example. The one that I always use, because it's an application that I always install on all my operating systems, specifically the Windows ones, Windorstat. So, a great tool, and all it does is it tells me where all the files are on my file system. I love it. It's an old application. Newer versions, newer applications of the same type do exist, but Windorstat is my favorite, so that's the one that I use. So if I wanted to install Windorstat, I could go to the Windorstat website, or I could Google for Windorstat, and I would come to a website, and it would say, this is where you want to download it from, or this is where you can download it from. Now, that could be an exe or an MSI, or it could be a zip file that contains an exe or an MSI, and I'd have to go and figure out if I'm installing onto an x86 operating system or if I'm installing onto an x64 operating system. I would need to download the right thing, and then if it's a zip file, I might have to unblock the zip file because downloading from the internet is notoriously dangerous. So you want to unblock the zip file that you've just downloaded. I might need to double click on an exe, and then I might need to hit next, next, next to get the application installed. Or if I'm really adventurous, I might dig into what the command line arguments that I could have passed to that exe or the MSI to do it in a more semi-automated way. All of that is work, right? So what Chocolatey as a package manager brings to the table is the ability to do all of that work or all of that administrivia for you, and it will capture all of those instructions, all of those things that need to be done in order to provision that application, that bit of software onto your machine. So all of that work, you would do it once. So if we go back to the last Back to Basics thing that we did, Josh wrote up this really excellent post on how to create a package. And in there, he captured all of the things that would need to be done to install. I completely forget what the application was now that he was doing, but he might ping me on the chat as to what it was. But he captured all of the instructions that Chocolatey, as a package manager, would need to do in order to install that application. And I think what it boiled down to, Corey is saying, was elk. That's the one he's saying. Fine. So to install the elk application on Josh's machine, he captured all of the instructions into that installation script. And then once that's captured into a Chocolatey package, you don't have to worry about that ever again because you've now captured all of those instructions in one place. And then it becomes a simple command that you can execute on your at the command line to install that application. So, as a high level, I think that captures the most of what I wanted to say And what I was going to do next, Paul, unless you've got any other comments, is I'm going to jump in and I'm going to show it in action.
The only comment I wanted to make was, you turned me into a monster there by saying, yeah, but that's just the way you are. But one of the things that I like to repeat about Chocolatey CLI is Chocolatey CLI manages packages. Packages manage software or whatever they're deploying. Chocolatey does not manage software. So that, I think that's the important distinction as well there. But other than that, no, you're awesome, Gary. So, do you want me to
Could you put my screen up?
share
There we go.
this?
Right. So, just so we can see that I'm not cheating, so I'll explain what I've got here. So this is a virtual machine that I'm running here. It doesn't have Chocolatey installed currently. So Chocolatey, the CLI, or Chocolatey CLI, has a choco.exe, which is the entry point for Chocolatey operations. If I try running that just now from my PowerShell session, it's not there. So I'm not cheating. It's not installed. I have cheated a little bit on this virtual machine that I'm running here because I've pre-installed .NET Framework 4.8. So as an application, Chocolatey requires .NET Framework 4.8 to be installed. Now, the default Chocolatey installation script, which I'm away to come to, does handle the installation of .NET Framework 4.8, but that means a reboot of the operating system in order for .NET Framework 4.8 to be installed correctly. So to save that happening in the demo that I'm doing here, I've opted to cheat just a smidgen and have .NET Framework 4.8 already installed. But everything else on my way to show is par for the course. So what I want to do is I want to install Chocolatey CLI onto this machine. So how do I do that? So there's a couple of there's more than a couple actually. There's various ways that you can install Chocolatey, but the default way would be you go to the Chocolatey website, which is chocolatey.org, and up at the top here there is an install button, and that install button or link takes you through to the installation instructions that we have for Chocolatey CLI. Now, scrolling down through here, there are different ways that you can or how you want to choose to install Chocolatey. The default is for an individual, and that's the one that we're going to use here because we're kind of not narrowly focused on kind of the how do we use this as an individual or on a personal basis. But there's absolutely instructions for doing it in a different way. So if you're using a configuration management system like Ansible or Chef or Puppet or DSC, then there are specific instructions for doing it using those technologies. But for us, we are an individual, so we just want to install it. Stevie's made a comment. We'll come to that in a second. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come up here and we're just going to click copy on this big long line of PowerShell here. The important thing in terms of installing it this way is this operation does need to be done from an elevated administrative console, whether that's PowerShell or whether that is command line. There's different options for installing from a command line. I'm doing it from PowerShell. So I haven't copied that. I'm just going to paste it in there. And at that point, I can just hit enter. So at this point, what's going to happen is this community.chocolatey.org/install.ps1, it's going to be downloaded and it's going to execute directly in this PowerShell session. A couple of things there is normally or never in this day and age, you would never want to knowingly just randomly run arbitrary code from the internet. You want to make sure of what you're running. So you always advise people to go and look at the script the first time you've run it and make sure that it's not doing anything nefarious that you don't like. What we do with all of our scripts is we sign them with our Authenticode certificate. So you can always validate that the script is signed by the people you expect it to be. But having done your due diligence and accepted that installation script is not doing anything nefarious, you can just simply go ahead and run it. So at this point, what's going to happen is it's going to reach out and it's going to actually download the Chocolatey package that is Chocolatey. So there's a little bit of inception happening there because Chocolatey ships as a Chocolatey package, and that's how it can be upgraded. So now that that installation script has completed, various things have happened, but the main one is that the choco.exe is now available in my path, and I can execute it from my PowerShell session. So in terms of what happened under the hood, if I go ahead and look at what's happened, I'm just going to gloss over this because you don't need to know about it, but I did want to just point out a couple of things. So under the hood, what's happened is that, not in there, if I go to the program data folder, so C program data, there's a new Chocolatey folder been created. And in here, this is where Chocolatey does all of its management of packages. So this is where you'll find the packages that Chocolatey is managing. So as I said, Chocolatey itself ships as a Chocolatey package. So if I go into the lib folder, I'll see here that there's a folder specifically for Chocolatey. And in here, I'll see this thing called the chocolatey.nupkg, because that's how we pronounce that file extension there. The Chocolatey NUPKG file, that is the Chocolatey package. And as we learned about in our previous episode in the Back to Basics series, a package is just a fancy zip file. So if I were to, if I had 7-zip installed, for example, I could extract that nupkeg, and find all the files contained within that fancy zip file. And one of those would be the choco.exe. But what's happened as part of the installation, all of that has been brought out, and we've now got this choco.exe residing here, and that's the one that's actually accessible or usable from the command line. So that's just a little bit into the technical details. And I wanted to point that out just because we'll maybe come back to it later once we start actually installing things. But for the most part, you never need to come into here. Chocolatey will manage all of those packages transparently for you. You don't need to typically worry about them. But there are some reasons you might want to come in here once you get further down into your Chocolatey usage. So with that in mind, what I'll mention is that up on the installation page, if you scroll down just a smidge, there is a section here that will take you over to a section that says more installation options. So if you don't want or you want to use a more advanced or slightly different way of installing Chocolatey, then we've got them all listed here. Chocolatey ships as a Chocolatey package, but we also ship it as an MSI. So if you prefer an MSI installer, you can absolutely use that. Stevie hinted at it in the chat, but you can actually install Chocolatey from Winget. So Winget is... No, actually, I'll hold that thought because that'll come later. But if you wanted to install it via Winget, you absolutely can. And there's various other ways in here in terms of using configuration management systems, whether you're behind a proxy, not behind a proxy, all sorts of things. So it's fully documented. So if you've got any specific needs in terms of installing Chocolatey, you should absolutely be able to find them in here. If not, reach out and we can help you get further down the path. So now that I have Chocolatey installed, what does the Chocolatey CLI do for me? So what I spoke about before is I wanted that Winderstat application. I wanted to install that. So before I talked about, well, I'd have to go to the Winderstat website. I would have to download it. I'd need to do command line options, or I might need to do next to get it all installed. But now that I've got Chocolatey installed, I can just use the Chocolatey install command to provision and deploy that application onto my machine. So as an example, I can just do choco install winderstat. So just to go through a couple of things that are happening here. So Chocolatey, out of the box, comes configured to use the Chocolatey community repository as its default source. So we spoke about, that was the first Back to Basics episode that we did. So we spoke about what the Chocolatey community repository is. So that's essentially, it houses over 10,000 packages that install various different applications onto your machine. Winderstat is one of those. So when I typed in the command that was choco install winderstat, it's reached out to the Chocolatey community repository, and it's essentially done a search. and it's done a search for a package with the name of Windorstat. And what it's done is it's been able to find one. It's been able to find a package called Windorstat. So what it's done then is it's then downloaded that package. So if I were to go and look now, not into the logs folder, because that wouldn't help, Chocolatey has provisioned and placed that package that is the Windorstat package into its folder, into its lib folder. So what it's then done is it's reached into that nupkeg, into that package, and found that there's a Chocolatey install.ps1 file. And now what it wants to do is it wants to run the Chocolatey install.ps1 file. But Chocolatey, because it's secure by default, doesn't just let any arbitrary code execute on its machine, on the machine it's been installed to. Now, there are ways to bypass that if you're happy with it, and that's what we're talking about here, is that if you don't want to have this prompt, or you don't want to have to sit and wait, you can use the -y command when you're installing the package. Or if you don't want to install the -y or to use the -y option for every operation that you're doing, you can toggle the feature to allow global confirmation. But that's something that you opt into. Chocolatey is secure by default, so it's not going to just execute a bit of script. It's going to say, do you want to run this script? And then you'll be like, well, I don't know, do I? Because I can't see it. So a couple of options there. You could go to the Chocolatey community repository and you could see the contents of that script. Or if you wanted to, you could just hit P here and it'll actually show you the contents of the script before you execute it. So I'm not going to go through this in detail because Josh went through this in his blog post, and in the previous Back to Basics episode, we talked through what's going on within these scripts. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but essentially what it's going to do is it's going to install an application installer. It's got the setup.exe is an application installer that Chocolatey has found is contained or referenced within that package that you've just downloaded. So at this point, I can say yes, and it will then execute that script, which will install Windorstat. And now what it's telling me is that Windorstat has been provisioned into the C programs folder in the Windorstat folder. So if I then come over to here and then type Windorstat, where did I get to? Dir stat. I've now got that application installed on my machine. So again, just to reiterate Paul's point before, two separate things have happened there. One is that the Windorstat package has been placed onto the file system in the Chocolatey lib folder. And on top of that, the Windorstat application, whose instructions were included within the Chocolatey package, has been installed onto my machine. So what we should find is if I go up to add remove programs and use that, we'll see that there's an entry here for Windorstat, because that's an additional application that's now been installed, but the Chocolatey package is also on my file system. So if I do choco list here, which is a command that will list out all of the packages that I've currently got installed on my machine, we'll see that I've now got Chocolatey and Windorstat, where I only had Chocolatey before. Does that make sense so far, Paul? Anything you wanted to add to that? Or
No,
questions?
no, I think we're doing well. We're doing well for time as well.
Okay. So, so I'll let you read the questions and then you can bring them up if there's anything that needs to be brought up. So that's Chocolatey CLI has then installed an application, installed a package which happened to install an application onto my machine. So then the next obvious question is, well, what else can it do? So I just happen to.
That's actually a good segue. Just as you said, what else can it do? There's actually a question in the chat. I think it'd be useful to pick up at the moment.
Okay.
So I'll read the question out. It's on screen, but it's also during an app installation. Let's say there's a step to install a toolbar, or there are various config options. Does Chocolatey accept by default?
So let's say there is a step to install a toolbar, or there are various config options. Does Chocolatey accept by default? So yes is the answer. I don't know how deep we want to go on this. So what it comes down to is, where do we start with this? The if the application that you're installing has available options to pass into the native installer to do stuff, then Chocolatey by default has a mechanism for you to pass those command line arguments down into the application installer. So if I were to do choco install -h, then what we can see is that there are lots of options. Actually, that's maybe not the best way of showing that. So I'm going to go off to the online version of the help documentation for the install command. So if I go down here and perhaps look at some of these, then where's the one I want? Over here. So Chocolatey as a command line application has an option that is install arguments. So if the underlying native installer accepts command line options to be passed to it, then you can take those options, put them onto the command line as you're installing the package, and then they will be fed through to the native installer and then do what they do with the native installer. Now, the reason I hesitated with that is because Chocolatey CLI as a package manager also has the concept of what we refer to as package parameters. So if the maintainer of the package has exposed some command line arguments via package parameters, then it's slightly easier because you can just do things like this. So this is an example of installing Git at the command line using the Git Chocolatey package, where the maintainer of that package has made available just flags that you can place onto the Chocolatey command when you're installing, and then they will be translated into the command line options that need to be passed to the native installer. So the shorter answer, as was hinted at in the chat there, is that yes, absolutely depends. If the package has just got a native installer and all Chocolatey is doing is running the native installer, most likely you would need to use install arguments to control the native application installer. But if the package maintainer, who on the Chocolatey community repository has provided additional ways of doing things, then the package parameters argument is more likely the way you're going to be doing things. So it absolutely depends, but the shorter answer is yes, you can control that and make the native installer do what you want it to do. Yes.
I think as well that comes back to what I said at the beginning, or close to the beginning, is that Chocolatey manages packages. Chocolatey CLI manages packages. Packages
Yes.
manage software. Chocolatey CLI does not manage software. So, in the question that says, let's say there's a stepped installer toolbar or other config options, does Chocolatey CLI accept by default? No, no, it doesn't, because Chocolatey CLI is not managing the software. The package is doing that. So as part
Yes.
of those instructions that I know it's terminology, but I think it's important just to clarify it. As Gary kind of mentioned earlier, the package contains instructions. And those instructions are in PowerShell. So those instructions will say install that toolbar. In the case of Git here, it will say, put it into that directory, or it will say this, or it will say that. So it's those instructions that does that. And accepts those things. Potentially as a default, it will say, well, there's lots of options. Here's what unless you tell me as part of package parameters, I am going to do these things as default. So that the package again does that work, and Chocolatey CLI kind of manages those packages.
So just going back to where I was going to go next. So Chocolatey CLI as a command line tool has, or rather, I showed the install command, but Chocolatey as a tool has lots of commands that it can run. So there is install, there's upgrade, there's, I'm going to get to there yet. So there's install, upgrade, outdated, new, list, pack, push, pin. There's lots of things that it can do. So we're not going to go into all of these because the main focus of this is just kind of using Chocolatey CLI to do stuff that you're interested in. But I'm going to mention a couple of them before we transition off to the next thing. So the first thing I wanted to do is look at Choco Outdated. So what Choco Outdated is going to do is it's going to look at the packages that you have installed, and it's going to check to see against the available sources that you've got configured, whether some of those packages are outdated and whether you need to upgrade them. Now, because this is a fresh install of Chocolatey, and I've literally just installed the latest version of the Windorstat package, I don't have any packages that are outdated. But if I did, you could just run the Choco upgrade command with a simple Choco upgrade all. And it would rattle through all of the packages that you have, check to see if they're outdated, or check to see if they are in need of an upgrade, and it'll just run off and upgrade them all for you. So once you've got all your applications under Chocolatey management, keeping them up to date on your machine is a relatively simple process because it's a one single command to do all of those things. The other thing I wanted to point out is because I use Windorstat all of the time, I just happen to know that Windorstat was the name of the package. But if I didn't know what it was, then you can search against your available sources for that package. So if I wanted to search for Windorstat, it will come back and tell me what packages are available that meet that criteria. Now, what I'm getting here is I'm getting lots back because Windorstat maybe appears in multiple places, or the way that our search works is it will show it'll break that word that I'm searching for up into different sections. So that's why I'm getting lots of ones that are using Win, for example. But I can control that again by saying, well, actually, I think I might know that it's exactly called Windorstat, so I can narrow down the focus of the search that's being done. So Chocolatey as a command line tool allows you to do all of those searches. But if you don't want to do those searches at the command line, you can absolutely just walk up to the community website, and then on our page here, I can then click Find Packages. And from here, again, I can just search for the ones that I'm interested in. At that point, I might get a suggestion as to what it is, or I can complete that search and it'll show me the packages that are available. So that was pretty much what I wanted to show in terms of using Chocolatey CLI. And because we've spoken around how we install it and how we can use it now. So I was then going to jump over to a couple of other things, unless there were some more questions that needed to be answered first, Paul, before we go into the next part.
Couldn't find the mute button. No, there's no additional questions. The person that left the question that we'd answered said many thanks for the clarification. Okay. I'm not going to try and pronounce the name. That's why I said the person.
Fair enough. So
but there was actually one thing I was going to ask, Gary. So you mentioned it a couple of times. So you said that particularly Choco outdated command, it will check against your available sources.
Yes.
But we said at the beginning that Chocolatey comes with the community repository resource source by default. Does that mean you can add other repositories, other sources?
Correct. Absolutely, you can. So the command that I've just run there is Choco source list. So it's listing out all of the configured sources that Chocolatey CLI is aware of. So by default, out of the box, it only has one and only one, and that's the Chocolatey source, which happens to point at community.chocolatey.org. Now, if you have other sources, so what do I mean by other sources? So you might, as an organization, you might have your own internal repository of Chocolatey packages. That could be done using things like Sonatype Nexus or Artifactory or ProGet, or insert another repository manager system here. So what that allows you to do is to have your own internal list of packages, and you house them all in your own internal repository. The reason you want to do that is because if Chocolatey website went down for some reason and you're trying to install things, then you would be shielded from that because you already have the packages in your own environment within your within your network. So typically, a source is another repository server, like a Nexus, Artifactory, ProGet. But it can also just be a file share. So if you had a folder of Chocolatey packages somewhere, just C packages, or on a UNC share somewhere, then you can absolutely just store all of the packages in a folder. Now, that's not something we necessarily recommend, because you lose out in some functionality in terms of searching and being able to find packages on just a file share compared to a repository server, but you can absolutely do that. And that would just be done with the source command. So you could do choco source and then add, and then there are options there for providing the name of the source, the URL of the source, etc. And then if you decided you wanted to remove it, then it's choco source remove, etc. So hopefully that helps. In a organizational context, we would actually recommend that you don't have this source, because as an organization, you wouldn't want to rely on and trust the community website, because you would want to internalize all of those packages and have them within your own environment. So in that scenario, we actually recommend that you remove the Chocolate community website as a source and instead rely on your own internal sources. So you've absolutely got flexibility there in terms of where the packages are coming from, and ultimately where the what applications you have available to install on your machines. So hopefully that answers that part of the question.
It does. Thanks, Gary.
Okay. So the next thing I wanted to cover was, why does Chocolatey CLI require administrative permissions? It's a common question. It kind of comes up from time to time. So I wanted to make sure that we address it here, because what I said right back at the start was that in order to install Chocolatey, you have to do it from an elevated or administrative PowerShell session, and that's for a couple of reasons. But the main reason is Chocolatey wants to be secure by default, right? So when we installed Chocolatey, or when Chocolatey ran the script to install itself, it created this Chocolatey folder. But it also made sure that that folder is locked down to only administrators. So a non-administrator user couldn't come in here and start tinkering with the files and folders. They can view them, but they can't do anything with them. And the reason for that is security. We want Chocolatey CLI to be able to manage itself and its packages without being interfered with by the outside world. And we simply can't do that if we're not doing that in an administrative context. The other part of that, the reciprocal of that, is that, well, normally if you're installing software onto your machine, you're installing and putting things into the registry. You're installing files onto the program files folder. You're installing lots of things. And typically, an administrator needs to be available to do all of those things, and it needs to have administrative permissions. So again, we want to install Chocolatey as that with administrative permissions so that it can perform the actions that has been requested. So although it is possible to install Chocolatey in a non-administrative mode, it's not necessarily something we recommend, but you absolutely can do it. So I'd refer you back to those list of instructions that I showed you on the install page. And one of those is to do Chocolatey as a non-administrative installation. You will be limited, though, in terms of what kind of packages you can install at that point, because if you try to install something that requires an administrator permissions to install, then the package installation is going to fail because it won't be able to complete the instructions that it's been told to do. So hopefully that covers that side of things. One thing I did want to point out is related to that is, what was I going to say there? So as a Chocolatey for Business offering, if the installation of programs or software in a non-administrative context is something that you're interested in, then we offer a system called self-service via Chocolatey Agent, which allows non-administrative users to perform the installation of a bit of software or via a package using Chocolatey Agent to perform the elevation. So it's absolutely something you can do, and a lot of our customers do it. But again, that's not the focus of this talk. I just wanted to mention it in passing because the software is there, or the functionality is there. The other thing that I wanted to mention in passing, because Paul said that I was allowed to, is if you are not a fan of the command line, then there is also an application called Chocolatey GUI. So the clue is in the name, but Chocolatey GUI is a GUI version of Chocolatey, which allows you to perform the same operations, install, upgrades, uninstalls, but from a GUI, from a window, from an application. So having installed Chocolatey GUI, so all I did there was I ran chocolate. I can't spell chocolatey today. All I did was choco install chocolatey, and I'm going to run chocolatey GUI from the command line now. And at that point, what I'm going to get is I'm going to get a Windows, not a Windows, but a Windows application that has the exact same functionality. So it's listing out here. So this is giving me the exact same results that I would get from Choco List. So if I run Choco List, I'll see that I've got some more packages now because Chocolatey GUI brought them down as dependencies, but I can see them in a tiled format. So I've got a slightly, in my opinion, as a non-biased core maintainer of the Chocolatey GUI project for a while now, you get a slightly better view of the packages that you've got installed because you get them as icons and you can see what they are, etc. And then I can see my available sources listed on the left-hand side. So if I wanted to search for and see a package that I could install, then I can do that from the Chocolatey GUI application. So the main topic of this talk was Chocolatey CLI, but Chocolatey GUI is also there. So I wanted to point that out. And the last thing that I kind of wanted to cover was another common question is, we kind of touched on this already, but I just wanted to make sure that we're covering it in detail, a little bit more detail, is can Chocolatey CLI manage other software types? So what do I mean by a software type? So a software type, I could be installing a bit of software as an exe. I could be installing a bit of software as an MSI. I could be installing a bit of software that is just literally a standalone exe that doesn't actually install anything. Or I could be, the bit of software could be the installation of a PowerShell module. The installation of a package could be just a script that's put onto your file system. It could be a configuration that you need to apply to all your machines. It could be a script that literally could do anything. So all of these software types absolutely can be managed by Chocolatey and Chocolatey CLI. And the reason I say that is because, again, we both myself and Paul have been banging on about this point, but Chocolatey manages packages. The contents of those packages could be instructions to install a bit of software. It could be instructions to make a registry change. It could be instructions to run off and install a license file that you need to put onto your machines. So Chocolatey CLI and the Chocolatey packages can manage any pieces of software. Now, there's also a concept of alternative sources that exists within Chocolatey CLI. I'm not really going to dig into that at the minute because that's definitely veering off the plan of what this Back to Basics talk was. But if, for example, you wanted to install a Windows feature or to ensure that a Windows feature was enabled, then there's an alternative source within Chocolatey that allows you to manage those aspects of your machine as well. So I'd encourage you to look at the documentation that we have for alternative sources to dig into that a little bit more. And the last, or I think I said the last thing the last time, but I think I've got two more things that I want to mention just in passing. The topic of Winget came up in the chat a little bit before, and being able to install Chocolatey CLI from Winget. So for those of you that don't know, Winget is a Microsoft-owned product that is attempting to do very similar things to what Chocolatey CLI does. Now, there's lots of differences, there's lots of similarities, there's lots of information that needs to be discussed in that discussion. And simply put, we don't have time to talk about it just now. But what I will say is that my ever-present co-host, Paul, recently did a talk at PSConf EU. I think you've actually done it in a couple of places now, Paul, that does a full comparison, a side-by-side comparison of what Chocolatey and Chocolatey CLI is, what Winget is, strengths, weaknesses, literally side-by-side, and it's a very fair representation of what both of them do. That talk was recorded, and I think the link that Paul just put onto the screen there is a link to the YouTube video. So I'd encourage you all to go and look at that if you wanted to understand the key differences between what is Chocolatey and what is Winget. But the point that Stevie was making right back at the start is one of those alternative installation options for Chocolatey is to do Winget install Chocolatey or is it Wingate install chocolatey.chocolatey? I can't remember. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head.
It's
But
chocolatey.chocolatey, yeah.
it is chocolatey. Okay. Because Wingate makes the distinction between a publisher and an application name. So you need both in the installation, whereas we would just do Choco install Wingate, which is actually a package you can install if you so chose. So there's a little bit of inception happening there. You can do Wingate install chocolatey.chocolatey or chocolate install Wingate. So that's definitely something. If that's something you're interested in, I encourage you to watch the video of Paul doing a talk on all of that. And the other one that comes up quite often is, does chocolatey CLI work on Linux and or Mac? So if you've been listening to what we've said, the obvious answer would be no, because chocolatey is the Windows package manager. So why would you run chocolatey or chocolatey CLI on anything other than Windows? The slightly longer answer is, well, stole my thunder there, Corey. The slightly longer answer is, well, it depends, because you absolutely can run chocolatey CLI on other operating systems. There are a couple of caveats in there, and that's all documented on our website as well. But what it comes down to is the different workloads that you might do with Chocolatey. So, as an example, if you are an application creator and you're building that application on some CI/CD pipeline, and the output of that build is an EXE or an MSI, and you want to also package that up as a Chocolatey package, then running the Choco Pack and the Choco Push commands under that in that workload context actually makes a lot of sense, because if you're doing the CI/CD pipeline on a Linux machine, for example, and you didn't want to spin up a Windows virtual machine just to run Choco Pack and Choco Push, then you can absolutely do that using Chocolatey CLI, which will run in those contexts. And there is actually also a Docker container. Yes. Is it a container? Is it an image? I forget. I can never remember which way around it is, whether it's a container or whether it's an image.
It's an
Someone
image.
will tell me in the chat. But there is up in Docker Hub, there's an official Chocolatey container image. Dang it.
Image.
That you can use if you wanted to, right? So thank you, Stevie. It's no, it's not. It's definitely not a container image. You're lying. So that was, like I said, that was one of the other common questions that come up. If you are interested in other questions or if you have other questions, I would encourage you to look at our website. There's in the FAQ section. There are lots of discussions or other questions that we hope are answered there. And if they're not, definitely feel free to reach out. I can only ignore you if I don't see the question, but I will endeavour to answer any questions that I see. So I think with that, Paul, that's kind of all I wanted to show. So if there was anything else you wanted to talk about at this point or ask about, now is the time.
There was a question there from Ryan. Where do you recommend people go if they have questions around using Chocolatey? The reason I put it on the screen is you were talking about that.
Yep.
So there's different places that you can get assistance, get help, depending on which user you are. So if you're an open source user, the best place to start actually is our Community Hub Discord server. I'll actually just pop that onto the screen, which is there. And you'll get community assistance there for the open source version. If you're a Chocolatey for Business customer, then if you run the command choco space support, it'll tell you the options that you have available to you, and one of those will be to reach out to support, and our support team there can answer any questions that you might have, including helping you set the Chocolatey CLI, Chocolatey for Business products up as well. But there's other places you can get help. There's GitHub issues. It depends what GitHub discussions. It depends what it is you're looking for. So we've got the Chocolatey Community Chocolatey Packages repository, which some of the Chocolatey team are in. So if you've got an issue with the packages that are maintained in there, you could go there. So again, I mean, really just to quote, I think Corey was the last person to say this, but it depends again. Maybe we should just rename this live stream to be it depends. So it just depends what kind of user you are of chocolatey products and what it is that you're really looking for. But there's many places you can reach out to. Other than that, there's no more questions that have come up in the chat. I think what we've done is we've covered quite a lot of what chocolate CLI is from the basics. We're trying really carefully not to sort of dig into, and I know you've said it a couple of times, Gary, dig into the more complicated, the more in depth. Is probably the better way, because chocolate CLI is a very powerful tool, and it can quickly get complicated if you're trying to do too much too soon. And I think back to basics, we're really just looking to focus on the easy part, the simple part, the part that is how do you get it installed, how do you install some packages, what packages are, and and then from there your enthusiasm and your interest, where you can dig into the docs, you can ask questions, will take you further, and you'll just learn more about the product and other chocolatey products as you go along. And if you're a more visual person as opposed to command line, you've got Chocolatey GUI there as well, where you can still have the same power to be able to install and manage those packages, but in a much more visual and graphical format, rather than digging into the command line all the time. Somebody's actually asked a question just as we're about to wrap up there. I'll just put it on screen. Maybe explain Choco Pin.
Sure. Sure. So what I showed before. Actually, let's just clear the screen so we can get back to it. So I showed before that I can Choco list, and it'll show all of the packages that are currently installed on that machine. And what I also said was that there was another command. I kicked off the installation of Acrobat Reader from Chocolatey GUI just to show it working, and Acrobat Reader is trying to steal my focus. So I also said that if I were to do Choco upgrade all, it would run through all of the packages that I have installed, and if there were an update available, it would go off and it would perform that upgrade on that package, which would obviously, depending on what it is, upgrade the underlying application as well. But if for some reason, so let's say that I really like version 2.1.0 of Chocolatey GUI, right? And I didn't want it to automatically upgrade. What I can do is I can do Choco Pin add -- name Chocolatey. I'm really struggling to type today. Chocolatey GUI. So what that does is it adds a pin onto that package. So if I were to then run Choco upgrade all, and there was an upgrade available for Chocolatey GUI, it wouldn't be upgraded because I've pinned it a specific version. So why would I want or need to do that? Well, there's some reasons. Chocolatey GUI is maybe obviously a bad example, but if you've got a specific version of, I'm trying to think of an AutoCAD, right? Let's say you've got AutoCAD version 12 installed, and you don't want to upgrade to the next major version, then you could pin to that version of AutoCAD, and then when you run Choco upgrade all, it won't be included. It won't be upgraded because you've pinned it. And what you would then need to do is you would then need to remove the pin once you are wanting it to be taken over and be brought under Chocolate management again. So you would need to remove the pin again. Seriously. You would then remove the pin because it's now you now want to upgrade it using the Choco upgrade all command. So that's literally what it is. It's a pin to say don't upgrade this package. So hopefully that answered your question. Just try to see if there was any follow up on that. I use it for software that.
Yeah, serial limited to a version. I was going to say AutoCAD's a good example of that.
Yes.
Because you probably need a new license. Let's say version 13 comes out. You'll need a new license for that. The license you might have is not going to work. So therefore, you'll install AutoCAD 13. Things don't work because you've not got a right license. Whereas you pin to 12, and that upgrade's not going to happen. And then you go and you get a license for AutoCAD 13, and then you can then remove that pin and upgrade successfully. So you can do it in a managed way.
Yep.
So yeah, there was another question as well from Stevie. That let me see. Where was it? Oh, I've totally lost it now. Stevie did ask a good question. It was around about yes, there it's there. Oh no, I've lost it. Is it possible to report chocolatey packages? Thank you. Report chocolatey packages alongside installed software the old-fashioned way, other programs and features. I think Stevie's really referring to the way you can do a choco list and get all of the software and programs and features programs and features as well. I think that's probably what he's meaning.
Well, the answer is yes. I just can't remember what the argument is anymore because we changed in Chocolatey CLI 2.x. We changed things, so it's
Is it not
I.
include
Sorry,
programs? Yeah.
it's I.
Oh, you're
So if
doing the
I
shorthand
so if I
version.
do this again, so if I do Choco List, so Choco List by default just lists out the packages that are installed. But if I do Choco List dash I, it will list out all of the packages that are installed, but it'll also include a listing for any applications that I have installed that are not currently under Chocolatey CLI's management. So I've got a couple here, Google Chrome and Strawberry Pearl. They're not under, well, see, they were under Chocolatey management before I blew this machine back to a starting point where I didn't have Chocolatey installed. So the applications are still installed. They're just not under Chocolatey management because there's no package that matches up to the application that's installed. So I absolutely could bring those applications back under Chocolatey management. There are ways to do that manually, but there are also ways within Chocolate for Business that allows a synchronization to happen to bring those applications under Chocolate management directly. But as my computer stands right now, I have 10 packages and therefore applications under Chocolate management, but there are 2 that are not currently under Chocolate management.
Awesome. Stevie's asked another question there with Garden Tea. Can you show the packages in programs and features as well?
I show that side by side. I'm not sure what he's gunning at here, but let's show that over here. So the applications now that I have under Chocolate Management, Adobe Reader, you see an entry for that. Chocolate GUI, I see an entry for that. Google Chrome, that's there, but it's not under Chocolate Management, so it wasn't showing up in their Chocolate list. Strawberry Pearl was in the same situation, but Windows was under Chocolate Management. The other ones that are here, we've got we also have Chocolate packages that are essentially Windows updates. So that's what these KB articles here. So you'd be unlikely to see maybe a specific entry for maybe a knowledge base knowledge base entry in here, or it's just that the the KB package is a known requirement on some operating systems. So Chocolate installs the package, but it doesn't actually install anything under the hood because it's not required for this operating system. But Chocolate is we didn't really touch on dependencies yet, Paul. That's maybe a topic for another discussion because I've shown that dependency packages do come down when you install certain packages, but we haven't spoken about what they are and what they mean. So that's maybe a topic for a different stream.
Yeah, no, I agreed. We're also just coming up to time as well on this. So, yeah, I think we've covered pretty much everything that we wanted to cover, and I think we've covered everything that we should cover. So, yeah, I think is there anything that you wanted to bring up, Gary?
I don't think so. I mean, there's absolutely certain. I could talk about these things all day, Paul. So there's lots of avenues that we could have went down, but I tried to constrain myself in terms of
Yeah.
what we're talking about here. But there's absolutely lots more things that could be discussed. So if anybody does have any ideas, let us know, or directions you want to take these sort of streams. I'm happy to talk about them all day.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into popping the stream survey on the screen. So if you have any any thoughts on today's stream, that's really quick. We've got there 10-15 seconds it'll take you to complete it. It's basically rate the stream, give us any opinions or any thoughts or any ideas you would have for future streams, and then that's it, done. It helps us to know that what we're actually providing, what we're actually doing, and the time we're spending here today is worthwhile for you. There's no point in us producing content that nobody wants to see. So it's really valuable for you to give us that feedback. And I'm going to leave that on the screen while I say thank you, Gary, for taking us through those demos today. And I hope everybody who's been watching today's got a better understanding of Chocolatey, both the package manager for Windows and the other products that Chocolatey includes as well. I've talked about the survey, I mentioned that at the start, and talked about it there, but it is really, really important we get your feedback. We really do appreciate it. So please just take that 10-15 seconds just to give us that feedback. It's very much appreciated. You can be notified of all the Chocolatey content that we produce by joining our community hub on Discord, subscribing to us on YouTube, or following us on Twitter or X, Mastodon, LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're on all the things, and you can find those links at the bottom of our homepage, chocolatey.org. Just scroll all the way down, or in the description of this video as well. Our next live stream is Unpacking Software on the 18th of April at 4 p.m. UTC. Join us for news, chat, and opinion on all things software and software management. It will also be available as a podcast, that particular live stream. We do the stream and we do a podcast as well of basically the audio of the stream as well. So you can consume it whichever way you like. So we'll hope to see you there. Thanks for your time today. Thank you, Gary, again. And everybody take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.